Okay, from our studios this week, back at our home bases in Los Angeles and Tampa, this is Green Tag Theme Park in 30, and this episode is all about the IAAPA Expo 2024. We're going to be breaking down a lot of the education and the networking sessions from this year's show, because that's kind of on brand for us, and because Scott was basically teaching everything at the convention. So we got a little bit of, well, you guys have an inside track, because we have one of the featured IAAPA teachers here with us.
And the funny thing is, I would love to sit here and do an entire show talking about the trade show floor, but I was on it for a total of about 45 minutes. So
yeah,
it was great.
I had a booth and I was barely there. So
I know I stopped by your booth in my 25 minutes and you weren't there. So there you go.
So did everybody else. First, I thought I'd give some context to our listeners who were not able to make it, to give you a sense of the scale. This is from the IAAPA press office. They did a recap of the event, and they said, IAAPA Expo 2024 successfully wrapped up today at the Orange County Convention Center, concluding a remarkable week that brought together 41,429 attendees from across the globe. This year's event saw a new attendance record, cementing its position as a premier annual event for the global attractions industry. Reflecting the growth and innovation in the industry, IAAPA Expo 2024 featured more than 1,100 exhibitors and approximately 27,000 buyers from more than 20,000 buying companies. With over 140 learning opportunities, the education conference provided unparalleled insight, best practices, and thought-provoking knowledge to attendees. In addition to the insights shared during the EDU sessions, attendees received a first look at the 2025 North America Economic Outlook Report, which forecasts the advancement of the attractions industry across the globe. This year's report marks the first complete inclusion of natural, adventure, and eco attractions, highlighting a six-fold increase in the industry's reach as combined attendance across destinations exceeds more than 1 billion visitors, supporting over 1.1 million jobs. Making the debut in the North Concourse, pavilions like the Haunting Grounds and street markets delivered immersive experiences and cutting-edge trends, while special events such as the Legends Hall of Fame Celebratory Affair and the inaugural Women in the Industry Networking Lunch captured the essence of perseverance and progress. That's a great recap. Yeah, I mean, they really hit on all the notes there. It was good.
And I've been going, I mean, just to put things personally, to give a little personal insight into that, I didn't have obviously all of that data while I was in attendance, but having attended IAAPA Expo for close to 30 years, at least, let's put it this way, at least 25. This was by far the most vibrant, the most engaged expo I have ever been to. Now, it could partially, from a personal standpoint, it could partially be because my focus shifted from, hanging out on the trade show floor to what we're going to talk about mostly in this show, the networking and the educational side. But sitting on the education task force, which is now done for the year, it was just nonstop, super exciting, and reached out to industries far beyond just your standard theme parks, zoos, FECs, aquariums, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It seemed as though this year it drew in more and more what I would call adjacent industries, like touring theater companies and things like pop-up events. We've talked a lot on this show about pop-up events in various locations that aren't necessarily affiliated with a theme park or any full-time attraction, but they are in and of themselves their own entity. And I wouldn't be surprised if going forward, that doesn't become more and more a focus of IAAPA Expo, because these people were there in great force at this year's event. So for those of you who have never attended IAAPA, just this recap alone should show why it's a good idea to put it into your budget. The way it is the only expo I am aware of where you can literally reach out and make contact with people from all over the world. Now, there are regional expos that IAAPA does. There are regional expos that other organizations do that do give you some of that as well. But this, and Philip, you attend more expos than I do, but I would say that this is by far the most comprehensive when it comes to global coverage or global activation.
The reason I read it verbatim is because I love that. I think it captures every dimension of IAAPA, and I agree with Scott. I've only been going about 10 years, and I think the thing with expos like this or whatever, I don't like those, the industry ones where people go every year, right? first of all, it kind of, you know what? It's a weird analogy, but stick with me all. It reminds me of Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party. And I always, rant about how the Christmas party, they don't change anything, but it sells out, especially in the early weekends, and people just go every year. And that kind of I think that's for me, what I don't like to see is no innovation. And IAAPA could do nothing, but because people go for 25 years like Scott, and they tell everyone, they would still grow. They wouldn't have to do anything and they would still grow. And yet they're continuing to push, like what they've been saying. They've been expanding and not just trying to include other niches of the industry, but also expanding to provide more services. Because the thing I noticed is the North Concourse, having the pavilions there, like that was innovative. Like the street market, clustering all of those food demos in one place, putting the haunting grounds. And then they've even got now onto the third floor where they had the professional development center up there. Come on, like you can bring your resume and make appointments with people to talk about what you could do for the industry and have portfolio reviews on the third floor. And then the second floor, you could demo food. And then you have the show floor. And they've expanded the show floor. And now they're doing a parking garage with shuttles because there's to bring, this is, they wouldn't have to do any of this and it could still be a successful show. But I think the fact that the teams are really trying, and I think, again, they always say that IAAPA is member driven, and sometimes that's just lip service. But I do think in this case, it is not. And you see it because you see how IAAPA is trying to adapt to the needs of the members by doing these things, by adding the women panel, by adding the food section, by adding all this stuff. That's all member ideas because the members need these resources. They want to learn about new food and food trends to bring into their parks. Because again, you could argue theme parks are ecosystems, right? Of mini ecosystems of the world. So they have all the elements that everything has. But yeah, to me, that's the biggest thing is that, because I think after like my fifth year, the show floor was less appealing to me because it's the same people and sometimes even the same booth, but just with different projects they're trying to sell. And I think IAAPA knows that, and they're like, but the more you go, the more you realize there's so much more that they keep adding levels and levels and levels and levels to this experience. So anyway, that's my thing.
No, I agree with you. And I think the thing too, so because I am, as I always have to do on this show, my full transparency, I currently, I just finished sitting on the IAAPA Entertainment Task Force, which I said. I am on the awards task force for IAAPA Honors. And I was also part of the team that put together the current testing process for ICAP and ICAE, which is certification, two different levels of certification within IAAPA. Plus, I wrote and teach the IAAPA Attractions Professionals Training. I teach the entertainment module for that. So I'm very much involved with IAAPA, and we are on the task forces and all of the organizations all of the factions that I have contributed to. We are constantly listening to and reading the surveys from the previous year. And, yes, the trade show floor, it used to be, when I first started going, that used to be where I spent almost all of my time. That was the place to go. And to Philip's point, when you see, I don't think that, some of the food vendors, for example, I don't think they've changed their booths. And to be honest, Micromelts and Dippin' Dots really don't have to, because people will still line up to get free samples of ice cream. So, duh. But I think where the real vibrancy and the real excitement is happening is in all the things that happen off of the trade show floor. And that's kind of what we wanted to focus on in this particular episode.
Exactly. So that leads us right into the session. So, of course, there are educational sessions. There are also sessions that are open to a wider range of attendees and to press and media. So I think Scott and I will be handing it back and forth as we talk about the different ones. And I guess they have like some of theirs that are like billed as more like for all passes, and then some that are billed only for education passes and tracks and back and forth. So the first one I want to talk about was the Fireside Chat, which was hosted by Jakob, who's the president of IAAPA, and it featured 3 panelists that are, I would say, from different ranges. There was kind of like a strawberry farmer turned FEC, and then there's Merlin Entertainment in there. So you had this like really wide range, of someone who's focused on one location, plus then Merlin, who's focused on everything. And during this panel, they talked about news that broke while we were there at IAAPA, which was all planned. That's the other thing that's so fun about IAAPA, is that even large companies that are not there, don't have a booth or whatever. I mean, Microsoft planned their Minecraft announcement during IAAPA so that they could talk about it on this fireside chat, which is really cool that you get these kind of overlays. But so basically, Merlin announced that they are partnering with Minecraft, and they're going to bring 2 Minecraft attractions to the US and the UK. So one in the US and one in the UK in 2026 and 2027. And they haven't announced the specific locations, but they announced 2 attractions one in the US and one in the UK in 2026, 2027. They're going to be investing about 110 million US dollars. Merlin will be into making this happen. They did release some concept art for these, and it looks basically like themed areas where you would walk into some of the areas from Minecraft. So we got a little bit of information about this. I'll link to the press release in the show notes so that you all can read it. But the thing that they mentioned during the fireside chat that they didn't talk about in the press release, basically they almost followed the press release exactly, so you can tell they were really rehearsed about this, because one does not just magically repeat what's in the press release word for word and pretend it's a conversation unless you have practiced. But the only thing that they mentioned was Jakob asked specifically if Minecraft would be to Merlin like Legoland was to them back in the 90s, when that started. And Scott from Merlin said, that's the plan. Yes. So it's very clear that they plan to take this brand and expand it into something very large, and that the first 2 locations are just testing, really to learn about how it's going to go, right? And then they plan to expand it. But that was the biggest kind of mix of news plus discussion that during the fireside chat. Some other things that Merlin talked about. It was a great chat because he was pretty candid about a lot of trends that he was seeing in the industry. And of course, he has, Merlin Entertainments touches so many different markets that they have an interesting perspective. But he talked about how numbers were down across the board, and that it was, again, like we've been talking about, to be expected. And that he thinks that a lot of the attractions kind of missed the pricing curve, which was interesting. Basically, he kind of was like, look, after the post-pandemic bubble, we should have adjusted our pricing faster to kind of like to meet people where their income was, especially in markets that were not the US. Because remember, Merlin operates everywhere, right? And so he kind of was like, a lot of other markets are in a worse economic position than the US. And so they have, missing the pricing on that was kind of a missed opportunity for him. And he did talk about pricing specifically, about how he believes that this was a topic he was eviscerated in the press for and in previously, which was he kind of had a dance around it in the panel. But essentially, he just reiterated that airlines have dynamic pricing. Everyone has dynamic pricing, and attractions should too. And it isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's more like allowing you to meet the kind of families where they are at the particular time, and then to spread out demand. But he was eviscerated in the press for that previously, because he says he still thinks that theme parks have a stigma against, entertainment writ large has a stigma about that, even though his argument was, you pay different prices for different seats in theaters, and that's okay, but for some reason other entertainment you can't. And on the other end of the spectrum, the gentleman who had the strawberry farm that turned in the FEC, his business model is attendance. So his is very low, like subsidized ticket prices that are always the same, because he's pushing people to purchase jam and food and beverage and stuff to get that, which was kind of like
he's using it as a marketing tool.
Right. So it's like the old model and the new model, I would say, and to kind of cap that off, Merlin talked about how they really think IPs are the future across their entire portfolio. And they think that not all IPs are created equal, and that it's not enough to have a good story. It needs to be a good story, an IP that has depth and story to it, but also an IP that has global recognition, at least for them, which is why the Minecraft thing is really, he's really like, there's not many IPs that we could even use, because we need something that every market that we're in would recognize. And there are very few IPs that you could actually get that have that broad appeal. And then Microsoft, Minecraft, a representative from Microsoft actually joined after they made the announcement. And they talked about how, I had no idea, but the Minecraft player base is stupidly, I mean, it's an enormous player base. Like I'll look for the numbers, but it's in the hundreds of millions. I mean, it's a ridiculous. But she talked about how half of their like Minecraft, their Minecraft community, 50% of them don't play actively. They just watch people play. And they kind of talk about how that behavioral trend is why they're trying to do this experiment, right? Because basically, if you have this huge base and then half of them are just fans, or they're just watching people play, that could, directly relate to then going into themed locations. And again, who else are you going to get? If you partner with Disney or Universal, you only have a few locations. If you partner with Merlin, you have almost every market in the world.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, because it's interesting that you led off with a panel, in essence. One of the panels that I was champion for, or co-champion for, was we wanted to do, within the entertainment track, we wanted to do a panel on ideation, diversity, equity, and accessibility. But we wanted to make it, instead of just a general panel, we wanted to make it specific to design. So we did a panel which I think went exactly as we had hoped it would. It was led by Janine Letford, who is an educator and a brain scientist. She basically talks a lot about how the arts can continue to expand our brain. But the panelists, and she also is very, very much involved with equity and inclusion, diversity, and how that's not just beneficial because it's the right thing to do. It's beneficial because it provides a much broader spectrum of ideas, a much broader spectrum of history, and can therefore attract a much broader spectrum of audience. Also on that panel was Mel McGowan and Monet Rooney, who you may not know Monet's name, but you should. She works for Bimaro Productions, and they were really fascinatingly focused on what we asked them to do, which was how to incorporate diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility from the design process. And it was fascinating, because they had one very simple takeaway that they expounded on in so many different ways, and that was, people have to be at the table from the get-go. It's not, let's design something and then run it up a flagpole with tests and market research. It is have a diverse group from the get-go in the design process, so that it is not just something that is slapped on as a seal of approval, but is organically woven throughout the design of the entire attraction, experience, whatever. And it was so refreshing to hear somebody say that, because it basically gave a really strong takeaway as to how to, what can we do to specifically move the needle. And it was pretty much, it all starts at the beginning, it doesn't start at the end. And then later that day, I did another panel. Sorry, I'm kind of melding these two together, because I know, Philip, you've got a lot to talk about in the next one. But I'm kind of melding these two together, because the second panel we did was the entertainment professional networking group. And as usual, this has become a very popular element within the entertainment track, because it was a full house. It was all around big round tables. And the way we've decided to do it, instead of just putting a bunch of entertainment people into a room and say, okay, now go talk, three of us from the task force all select a topic that we would like to speak about. We do a mini presentation, and then at the tables give people an opportunity to share their experience on that topic. So it's sort of guided networking. And then they would all change tables. We'd have another short speech. Then they'd all change tables, have another short speech. And then there was a 10 to 15 minute sort of free for all gathering to get those last little business cards exchanged or go back and finish a conversation that time would not allow them to finish earlier. And as usual, it was the response we heard was so incredibly positive. It was just really, really exciting. And the nice thing is, as we were sitting back, because when the task force looks at these things, we're of course evaluating how can we make this better? Did we go too far? What did And when we're sitting back looking at it going, this is the ideal interactive and immersive experience that allows the kings and the pawns to all just hang out together. So at these tables were young professionals who were just starting their careers, talking to people who were owners of companies or CEOs of theme parks, vice presidents of various departments, and all not just walking in going, okay, so what can you do for my company or what can I do for your company? Talking about things that really matter within the industry. And it's just, I'm so in hopes that we will get to continue to do that. And if after my tenure within the task force world ends, I hope they continue to invite me to participate because I really am very passionate about how well that particular one works. Because networking, let's be honest, networking is, for some, probably the most important reason to go to IAAPA. Because you will always find people that you didn't think you could ever possibly meet, or you never knew you wanted to. So it's just a great session, a great seminar that I'm really proud to have been a part of.
That reminds me exactly. I went to the APAC breakfast, and the networking was exactly what you say. I mean, it was guided. So what I liked about it, because I always like a mix. I'm not a like, let's sit here for a whole time and network, but I like how it's a mix because it was very similar. So the APAC breakfast, they had the speaker from Village Roadshow, and he kind of talked a little bit about Village Roadshow, but it was like 10 minutes. We're talking like a 10-minute, like, here's a background on Village Roadshow. And then he's like, look, here's what the trends we're seeing in the Asia Pacific region. So he really tailored it for that group of people. And then listeners at home, of course, I went to the Asia Pacific breakfast, and that's where I spent my networking time.
What a shocker. Not a surprised look on this face. No.
Yeah, I know, right? But then the networking where they did uncommon commonalities was the networking challenge. So you sat with your table and tried to come up with 5 things that are uncommon, but that you all have in common.
Oh, I love that.
And then they had table share, and people, the winner table was like about socks and whether you put them on like sock shoe or sock shoe, right? And so they were talking about, and so that was cute. And
that's great.
Our table was like talking about all of us having goldfishes when we were young, which is, I thought it was pretty good, but
that's neat. Yeah. See, our topics were, let's see, we did one on the more you do, the more you get to do. So basically, yes, and as a career builder. One topic was, should I develop, and keep in mind, it was entertainment focused. So should I develop new products internally, or should I use outside contractors, or both? And discussing the advantages and disadvantages, and then them sharing the actual their actual experience within that topic. And then the last one, I can't remember what the last one was. The last one, I don't remember what the last one was. Anyway, we had 3, but they were specific. They were very specific to. And they were designed that way, just like the commonalities. We specifically chose topics that we knew everybody in that room had actual practical examples of that they could share with their table.
Yeah, something to say. Yeah. I really, and actually it worked. So I was able to, for some weird reason, whenever I go to these things, like I always end up sitting near like the premier sponsors, which I feel like is not good for them or me. But in this case, it was fine because they were, the Pro Slide manufacturers. And it was great because I was able to talk with them about some of the tariff concerns that I have as a manufacturer. And if anything, I would say that IAAPA is missing, if anything, it is that there's not a place for the manufacturers to gather and discuss the challenges that we have that are unique from operators. And I that's the only thing I would say is that normally like manufacturers have to go to stuff that's for operators. and we don't have our own space. But I like it when I'm able to find other manufacturers and discuss issues with them. But the only thing I've noticed is the manufacturers don't like to go to education, because they're busy on the floor, or it's like manufacturers go to IAAPA because they think that the whole thing should be about getting leads, which is, not terribly wrong.
Or signing
but
contracts. I mean, there's some manufacturers who want to go and sign contracts. But I will say, that we mentioned earlier about IAAPA and IAAPA Expo being membership led. Well, if that is something that you truly think is important, put it in as a potential for next year. Go ahead and do a manufacturers forum, because if that is something that is truly in need, and it gets to because what people don't realize is when you submit for an education session, you are asked to submit in your primary in a primary track, whether it's entertainment or zoos and aquariums or whatever, but everybody on every task force gets the opportunity to see, all of the stuff that was listed as secondary, or even tertiary. And for example, one of my sessions, what I submitted as entertainment centric, but also submitted to marketing, and it was actually picked up as part of the marketing track. So I co-presented with Christy Chase Tozer from Rumblebuzz on the topic of blurring the line between promotion and product. And once again, deciding where that line fell, and is there really a line? Is it not better to just kind of give and take and cross-utilize each other's skill sets? And what was really interesting to me was, once again, just like the IDEA panel, the main takeaway, which I don't even think we intended it to be, but based on questions and the way we kind of answered those questions, is make sure that both of those key stakeholders are at the table from the get-go, so that as the project develops, it's developed in such a way that the marketing is truly in line with the product, and the product truly complements the marketing and allows for marketing opportunities to happen organically, because that's becoming more and more important.
I have a story about that, but we might have to wait for Unhinged because
I get 30 words. Is that?
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say about it. Just remind me in Unhinged, because I have a story about that.
Okay.
But what I really, the conversations that came out for me from the networking, similar to that, was like, so to me, for me right now, obviously the biggest challenge is the tariffs and planning for the tariffs. And I felt a little bit alone in that because we're one company, but also like, I can sit with my team and have crisis meetings and all that. But like at the end of the day, like I'm the CEO, it's my responsibility. And I kind of like am just in a silo. And so the networking opportunities, when I met other manufacturers, allowed me the opportunity to ask them what they were doing about this problem, and some of them really had no idea, but I will tell you, all of them were thinking about it. And we were able to have dialogue. And I will share one big, I think, direction that I was able to get on just from conversations during IAAPA is we're now planning on taking, if the tariffs do happen, the way that we're going to show them in the bills is we're actually going to line item them out and call them a U.S. tariff tax and explain that it's only applicable to product delivered in the U.S., but we're going to line item it as a tax item. And I talked to, this is the solution. Again, this is IAAPA in action. This is solution that came from networking with other manufacturers at IAAPA and other designers and other people in the chain, because we're one part of the sales cycle for attractions, and we're at the very end. So I had to talk to other people, and when in talking with them, they all told me, look, if you could do that, it would help so much for the transparency, because the problem is we have to go back to the client, and the client's going to ask us, why are the Gantom products suddenly all 60% more expensive, or 20%, or whatever it ends up being. And it's hard for us to explain, but if you add it as a line item, that really would make it easier for us. And so this is the kind of brainstorming that we just had in between these networking sessions with other manufacturers that helped me get to that solution. And then I could go talk to other people and see what they thought about it. And it seems like everyone thinks it's a good idea, because they can then just say that they can then show their client down the line, this is a tariff tax. This is precisely how much the tariffs are costing. And Gantom hasn't raised its prices at all. this is just a tariff tax, and it makes it easier for them to sell that adjustment to the budget to the operators, the theme park operators. So it's just this type of thing, because I could talk to the theme park operators, and I could talk to the designers, and I could talk to other manufacturers. And where else could you do that?
Right.
Other than something like
exactly. That's, like I said, that is by far the most robust opportunity to meet people throughout the industry, throughout the world. And on that, we are out of time. So obviously we rambled and we only really scratched the surface. But we are going to continue this conversation and this discussion as we move into Green Tagged Unhinged, which we do right after this. If you are a Patreon follower and have joined us for Unhinged, you'll get to hear even more. And what we're going to cover there are how this networking and these discussions actually expand outside of the trade show floor and outside of the convention center with the various parties and offsite events and experiences that can only happen at IAAPA Expo. So on behalf of Philip Hernandez and myself, Scott Swenson, this has been Green Tagged Theme Park in 30, and we will see you all again next week.